Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're taking a look at 1984, George Orwell's 1984. We've got the whole book here. And I got to say, this one's a real head trip.
Definitely considered a classic for a reason, and we're going to try to unpack exactly why that is, going beyond just the plot.
For sure, for sure. We're going deep on this one, folks, into the themes, the characters, that whole dystopian world, and why it's still so relevant today. So we're better to start than the very beginning. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. What a line, right? What hits you right away with that?
Well, it just throws you right into this world, doesn't it? Like, it's familiar, but it's also totally out of whack. Clock striking 13. That's not our world, right? It's like Orwell's hinting at this system where the rules don't make sense, where logic doesn't really apply.
Yeah, totally get that. And it gets even creepier when you see how much surveillance there is. Telescreens everywhere you look, Big Brother watching your every move, the thought police sniffing out any little unorthodox thought. I mean, it makes you think twice about what you say, even now.
Absolutely. Orwell creates this atmosphere where you feel suffocated. Like there's no escaping it. And it's not just the technology either. Even the way the city's designed, it's oppressive. Think about where Winston lives. Victory Mansions, it sounds kind of fancy, but it's really this rundown, crumbling building.
Right. And then you contrast that with the inner party and how lavishly they live. I mean, that can't just be about aesthetics, right? That seems strategic.
Definitely strategic. Keeping the outer party, the everyday folks like Winston, in a constant state of discomfort and scarcity, it takes away their energy, their resources. It makes it harder for them to even think about rebelling.
It's disturbing how effective that would be. It makes you realize how much our physical environment can affect us. So let's talk about Winston. He's described as just this regular guy, fair hair, varicose ulcer, kind of frail. He doesn't scream revolutionary hero, does he?
Right, and that's what makes him so relatable.
Right.
He's not some superhuman leading the charge. He's just an ordinary person trying to push back against this system that seems unbreakable.
Yet he does something so incredibly risky. He starts writing "Down with Big Brother" in this diary he's got. In a world where even your thoughts are policed, that's a huge act of defiance.
Huge. It shows how desperate he is for something, anything other than the life he's forced to live. It makes you wonder, what would drive someone to rebel like that when even the slightest slip-up could get you vaporized?
That's what I find so fascinating about 1984. It makes you really think about the limits of control. Can they really crush the human spirit completely? Speaking of control, though, let's talk about the party and how they maintain their power, because they are good at it, aren't they?
Well, those slogans, right? War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. I mean, talk about twisted logic, right? Orwell calls this doublethink, how they force people to accept these blatant contradictions.
It's almost like they're breaking people's minds before they can even start to rebel, conditioning them to just accept whatever absurd thing they're told.
That's exactly it. Doublethink. It's the ability to hold two totally opposite beliefs at the same time and somehow believe both of them are true. It's how they control thought, it's how they control language, it's how they control reality itself.
And then there's the 2 minutes hate, this ritual where they all go crazy, directing all this rage at Emmanuel Goldstein, who's supposed to be this public enemy. It's scary how easily they manipulate people's emotions.
Right. Like a pressure valve, letting them release their frustration in this super controlled way. And of course, it keeps that us versus them mentality going, which any totalitarian regime needs to survive.
Yeah, it's intense. Even just reading about it, you can almost feel that collective anger, that fear. It's crazy. And you realize these tactics, they're not just fictional, right? They're based on real-life propaganda techniques.
Exactly. And that's the brilliance of Orwell. He takes these things to their extreme, but by doing that, he shows us how it could happen anywhere, even in a society like ours. It makes you wonder, are we really immune to that kind of manipulation?
Right. Makes you think, okay, but amidst all this oppression and darkness, Winston finds a glimmer of hope in a very unexpected place. A secret note from Julia.
This is where things get interesting. Julia, she's this seemingly devout party member, but then, bam, she slips Winston a note, and it's a love letter. Talk about a spark of rebellion in this world of total conformity. I bet that threw Winston for a loop.
I bet it did. And their secret meetings, the risks they take just to be together, those moments of normalcy stolen away from the party.
It shows you how deeply human we are,
Yeah.
Even in the most oppressive systems, we still crave connection. We crave intimacy. Makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
About how much control they can really have over us deep down.
No doubt about it. And what's interesting is how Julia approaches rebellion. It's very much about personal freedom, carving out her own space within the system. But Winston, he wants something more. He wants to understand the system, to dismantle it, not just escape it.
Which leads him to the proles, the working class, right? He sees them as this potential force for change because they're less indoctrinated, less under the party's thumb. Is he right, though? Is there any real hope there?
It's hard to say. The proles, they represent this huge untapped potential, but they're also deliberately kept in the dark, distracted. There's this really powerful moment in the book where Winston's talking to this old man in a pub. The guy's longing for a past that nobody even remembers anymore. He starts reciting this rhyme about the churches a time before the party. Right, that feeling of the past being lost, of history being rewritten and manipulated, it's a big theme in the book. Shows you how important it is for the party to control the narrative.
Absolutely. They've got total control over history.
Right.
They rewrite records. They destroy evidence. They create this version of the past that suits them. They know if you control the past, you control the present. And if you control the present, you control the future.
Chilling. Right. And it makes you think about all the misinformation and historical revisionism that's happening today. Okay, but there's another layer here, because Winston gets it into his head that O'Brien, this mysterious inner party member, is part of this underground resistance movement called the Brotherhood.
A risky move, that's for sure. But something about O'Brien draws him in. He senses this shared discontent, like maybe there's a rebel hiding beneath the surface.
And their secret meeting with the illegal wine and their shared hatred of Big Brother, it's like something out of a spy movie. And then O'Brien gives Winston a book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, supposedly written by Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the state. It's like a bomb just dropped.
This book, it's like the key to understanding how this whole dystopian society works. We'll dive into its main ideas in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, let's crack open this forbidden knowledge, shall we?
Oh.
This book that Winston's convinced is the key to understanding how the party keeps Oceania in its grip.
Goldstein's book, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, it's quite a read. Lays out all the party's secrets, their motivations, their methods, the whole 9 yards. It's kind of terrifying, actually, when you see it all laid out like that.
Like a handbook for dystopia.
Yeah, exactly. One of the first things he talks about is this perpetual war that's always going on. You know, how Oceania is always fighting either Eurasia or Eustasia, but the enemy keeps switching.
Yeah, it always seemed like a convenient way to keep people scared and obedient.
That's the whole point. Goldstein says the war is how the party maintains its power, gives them an excuse to control all the resources, crush any dissent, keep the population on edge all the time.
So the war is not about actually conquering anyone. It's about control.
Exactly. It's never supposed to end. The goal is to maintain the status quo, to keep the party in power.
And this war helps maintain that rigid class structure in Oceania, right?
Oh, absolutely. The book lays out the three classes: the inner party, the elite at the top who run everything, then the outer party, the middle class where Winston is. Their job is to carry out the party's orders. And then there's the proles, the working class who are kept pretty much clueless and seen as disposable.
So this endless war mostly benefits the inner party then.
Right. They get to control the narrative, control the resources, and they benefit the most from all the suppression that the war allows them to get away with.
Okay, but how do they get people to swallow these contradictions? War is peace. Freedom is slavery. It's bizarre.
Doublethink, right. It's not just accepting these contradictions, it's about erasing any evidence that they are contradictions, any memory of a different past, a different way of thinking. The party controls information, history, even language itself.
So they're always rewriting history, messing with photos, changing the language, all to control what people think.
Exactly. Control the past, control the present. Control the present, control the future.
It's terrifying how effective that would be.
And Goldstein's point is that they're doing all this for one reason: power. Not to make the world better, not for some grand ideology, just pure power.
That's pretty bleak. So this whole system is just designed to keep the inner party in control forever, no matter the cost to anyone else?
Pretty much. It's a society where freedom doesn't exist, critical thinking is crushed, and truth is whatever the party decides it is.
For a while, though, Winston and Julia, they find a little bit of refuge, right? In that room above Mr. Charrington's shop, they have Goldstein's book. They think they're connected to the Brotherhood through O'Brien. For a little while, at least, they have some hope.
That room becomes a symbol of their rebellion, a place where they can be themselves, away from the party's eyes. Even in this super oppressive world, they find a way to connect, to experience a bit of freedom.
But it's fragile, right? Built on secrets and lies. And we know it can't last forever.
And when they get caught, Man, that scene is rough.
Yeah.
Just a brutal reminder that no one can truly escape the party, no matter how careful they think they're being.
And then the torture starts. The psychological stuff, the physical brutality. Orwell really doesn't hold back on showing us how terrifying totalitarianism can be.
He describes it all. The beatings, sleep deprivation, the constant pressure to conform, to betray everything you believe in.
And then there's that ultimate symbol of the party's power, Room 101, the place where they confront you with your deepest fear. It's designed to break you completely. One of the most chilling parts of the book.
Shows how well they understand human psychology, how to exploit our weaknesses and fears to gain total control.
What happens in Room 101, it's both fascinating and terrifying. It makes you ask yourself, what would it take to break me? What fear would make me betray everything I care about?
And for Winston, Room 101 is where he finally breaks.
Man, reading about Winston in Room 101, it's just brutal. Seeing him forced to betray Julia, to accept the party's version of reality, to even love Big Brother, it's like he becomes a completely different person. Just heartbreaking.
It really shows you the power of fear, how manipulation can just twist your mind, even if you think you're strong. The party knows. To really control someone, you have to break them first.
So if Winston, in the end, is broken, what does that mean for us reading the book, What's the message Orwell's trying to send?
I think that's what makes 1984 so powerful. It's not just a story, it's a warning.
Yeah.
Like, hey, wake up. This is what can happen when power goes unchecked, when people stop thinking for themselves, when we just accept whatever we're told.
You're talking about propaganda, right? The way information gets twisted, how dissenting voices get silenced, stuff that's happening in the real world right now, even.
Exactly. And that's why 1984 still feels so relevant, even though it was written so long ago. It's like Orwell's holding up a mirror, showing us what could happen if we're not careful, if we let apathy and fear win.
And the tools of oppression, they're not always so obvious, right? It's not always about jackboots and secret police. Sometimes it's more subtle, like a biased newsfeed, algorithms controlling what you see, a culture where it's dangerous to speak your mind.
Right, and that's what makes Orwell's warnings even more important now. We live in a world where information can be a weapon, where technology can be used to watch us and control us in ways Orwell probably couldn't even imagine.
It's easy to feel helpless, right? Like, what can we do against all that? Especially when you see what happened to Winston, how completely he was defeated.
The ending is definitely tough to swallow. But I think there's hope, even in just reading the book. Engaging with these ideas, by seeing what Winston went through, the horrors of this world, it reminds us of what we have to fight for, what we could lose.
So even when everything seems hopeless, there's still that little spark of defiance, that refusal to be totally silenced.
Yeah, that's where it starts, with awareness, recognizing the danger, questioning what you're told, not letting fear shut you down.
1984 is one of those books that really gets under your skin, Makes you think.
It challenges you, makes you question things, makes you want to do something. And in the end, I think that's a good thing. Because being aware, even if it's uncomfortable, that's the first step towards making a change.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into 1984, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this? What's the big question they should be asking themselves?
In a world where it's getting harder and harder to tell what's true, where information is a weapon, where everyone's pressured to conform, the most rebellious thing you can do is think for yourself. Question everything. Never stop searching for the truth.
I like that. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of 1984. It's been dark, for sure, but also thought-provoking and hopefully empowering. We'll see you all next time.